Peter Hooton, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Lovely sunny day. Just
Yeah,
waiting for the football to start, and everything's looking good. Yeah.
hopefully we'll see a good performance tonight after the last few. Hopefully we'll need one. But today, Peter, the first thing I want to go back to is where did it all start for you in music, and how old were you when you realised that music was the thing you wanted to do?
I never really decided that that's what I wanted to do. It was just like I run out of options of other things to do. Um, Obviously when I was growing up, I wanted to be a footballer. Obviously, but
Yeah,
uh, then I started. I was in a group when I was at school, but it wasn't really serious, and I wasn't the main person in the group, so I kept in the background a bit. But when I joined the group, when I was in my early 20s, really, I think it was, I was able to start writing songs. And so I suppose in the night, I suppose by the time we started the farm, which was about 1983, I thought then, well, there might be something in this. Not as a
yeah,
career as such, just something to do, really, to something to occupy yourself. And I wanted the songs I was writing, I wanted to, for people to hear them, obviously, but I've never even considered it as a career, it's just something I enjoyed doing.
What was the first real move you had when you first started the farm back in 1983? What was the
Yeah.
first real move? Can you remember the first unofficial
The
gig you
first,
did? Maybe a
well, yeah, I did a magazine in Liverpool called The End, which was a very satirical magazine, and we just attacked everyone.
yeah,
Everything that moved, every sacred cow Liverpool ever had. We just attacked everyone, and I just thought as a magazine, it was just like people in a pub having a laugh.
yeah,
But it was we put it onto a magazine format, like a fanzine. So when I first joined the band and decided we were going to play live once, all my cynical mates came along. And
yeah,
I just thought they'd rip me to pieces. But at the end of the concert, they just went, "That was all right, there," which is the best compliment you get off them.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
didn't. People weren't laughing. Put it this way. So, but I always remember one of the lads saying, "You'll never make it," but it was all right there, and that was the best compliment I was
yeah.
going to get.
Because with mates, you just expect them to rip you, but like you said, that is a very good compliment. When how did you meet the rest of the lads from the farm then? How did that all come together?
It was a bit by chance, really, because there was another group called the Excitements, and I joined them before we became the farm. But the main person in that was a lad called Phil Stevenson. He was the leader of the band, really, and he invited me in as the singer. And then Steve Grimes was the guitarist. Phil knew him, got him in, and Andy McVan, who sadly died in the mid-80s, he was brought in. And we all used to rehearse on a farm. And Steve, the guitarist, went out with somebody from the farm. So it was like an open house. So we used to rehearse there a lot. So eventually we just became called the farm because we didn't have
Yeah,
another name. And we didn't, I don't think the excitement suited us. That was more of a punky new wave name. And so we just ended up getting called the farm. And I always remember we got our first John Peel session in 1983, and John Peel was a big fan of The End. He used to read The End religiously, and always promote it. But he said, "I can't really give you a session, Peter, until you get a few good reviews in the music press." So we got a few reviews, and he offered us a session after the reviews. So that was, once you got a John Peel session, you thought you'd made it. You thought you
yeah,
were on the ladder. But after the John Peel session, nothing really happened. So we kept on. We
yeah,
got a John Peel session every year, and it kept us going really financially because you got decent wages off it because it was a musician union rates. So it kept us going each John Peel session we did each year, and Janice Long as well. And there was a fellow called Peter Powell as well. We did a session for him as well. You got paid decent money, so that kept us going for another year in rehearsals. but we couldn't really play much outside Liverpool. We didn't understand the music industry. We didn't realise you needed an agent. Didn't realise you needed a press officer. We thought it was all a meritocracy. We thought you just joined a group, you played songs, you got on the John Pierce show, and the next minute you're on Top of the Pops. And it doesn't really work like that. It was like you had to have money really, or a record company behind you to pay for all the things like a good studio, a good producer, a good plugger, a good press officer, a good lawyer. That's one of the most important things. I mean, we signed a terrible deal in the mid '80s. Signed our publishing away for lifetime.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 1990 when we had a better lawyer that we were able to get out of that deal. We still have to pay them something, the publishing company, but not as much as they were claiming. So it was shark-infested waters, the music industry.
Yeah.
And it's only when you realise that everything's done through press agents and pluggers, and that's how you get on the radio. And you don't get on Radio 6 by magic. You've got to have somebody who's plugging your records and saying, have you heard this new one? Because they've got so many people going in trying to play them stuff. And it wasn't until 1990 when we had a bit of money behind us that we could really afford those people, press agents and pluggers.
Because I imagine as a young band, it is very tricky with the amount of people that are in the same boat. Young bands, new artists, it is very tricky for a young band or artist to get their break and get on the radio and get them songs publicised. Yeah. Yeah,
you see, you've got a T-shirt on there, Adidas. You see, that's the type of stuff we would have worn in the 80s. Yeah. But record companies going, you've got no image, because the image at the time was groups like, let's say it was popular, there's groups like Frankie Goes to Hollywood, who had a very, macho camp image. You had Morrissey with the flowers in his pocket. Nobody looked like the Farm. You got to remember, this was 10 years before Oasis.
Yeah.
So if we turned up on stage with Adidas shirts like that, everyone in the audience could relate to it because they'd know what it meant.
Yeah.
But record companies didn't have a Scooby. They didn't have a clue about it. They didn't know about it. And we were trying to tell them, publishers and record companies, this could be the biggest image you've ever had. And Alan McGee always says to us, he'd seen the Farm and the meteoric rise of the Farm in 1989, 1990. And I think he could see what we were doing, and he could see that if he got a group similar to that he could, get on his label, he could take on the world. But at the time, 10 years before, you couldn't get arrested with gear you've got on.
Yeah. It was all a widespread of clothes in the 80s, I imagine. When you look back at some of the old Top of the Popses.
Yeah. Well, it was, but we were into tweed jackets. We were into cord jackets. It was a neo-mod look, really. That's what it was. It was a neo-mod look. It ended up getting called casual. Yeah. And I suppose that's not really the right term, because in Liverpool that was known as a scally look, But certainly when we played for this publisher called Morrison Leahy, who published The Jam, and we thought he'd understand it, because The Jam had come out of punk, but then they became a mod band, really, and they had groups like Secret Affair and the Chords and all. We were all from that type of tradition, really. So when we played in front of Morrison Lee, we all had crew neck jumpers on, straight jeans, training shoes or suede's on, and tweed jackets or cord jackets, and that. We thought we looked fantastic. But he was going, what's this image? He said, that's, you look like a mod band from the 60s. I mean, yeah, that's it, But that's the way we looked, and we weren't going to change it for anyone, I remember Bill Drummond, who was, the genius known as Bill Drummond, who's like a maverick, really. He was the manager of the Bunnymen, but he also started KLF, and he met me in a pub in Liverpool in the 80s, and said, "I know what you're doing." He thought it was contrived, you see, but it wasn't. He said, "You know, I'll manage it if you do everything I say." And I said, "Fuck off! You're joking. You know that is not going to happen." He said, "Well, I'll get you in tracksuits." Because it was all that New York image of the time of like tracksuit, street corner stuff, and hard dogs on stage. And I said, "We're the total opposite for that. We take the piss out of that type of stuff, you know."
Yeah.
And a few years later, East 17 as a band adopted that a bit, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think Bill Drummond realised that he wouldn't be able to control us, like, you know. But in the end, we were when we released the stuff in 1990, 91. He kept on ringing Produce Records, our record label, up. We'd started ourselves with some lads that had a bit of money. He started saying, "Who's behind this? Who's behind it?" He thought, you know, he was convinced there was a Malcolm McLaren or Tony Wilson type character. And we were going, "Nobody, it's just a load of lads from Liverpool." You got this, that kind of, no. Because every time we released a record, we would outsell the KLF.
Yeah.
You know, and it was fucking up their heads, you know, that we were able to do it seemingly without a major record company behind us. Everything we did was indie.
Yeah.
So our template was Factory Records, as we thought we won't have contracts. You know, they didn't have contracts. You know, the one contract they had was written in blood or something, you know, and something mad like that. So we never had contracts. And we just thought, that's a great... We didn't realise the Factory Records was a basket case, you know. At the time, it seemed like a successful record company, you know. But we didn't realise they were hemorrhaging money. And I think it's in Peter Hook's book that, you know, when he went into Factory Records, Tony Wilson had just bought a beautiful new boardroom table, you know, like an office table.
Yeah.
And someone said, "Well, where'd you get this from?" He went, "Oh, you know, bought it out the company's share." And what do you mean, the 50-50 profit share? So that comes off the top. How much was it? Oh, you know, 30 grand or something. So that'd come off there. You know, that would be an expense before the groups got their share, you know.
Yeah.
So we thought, we didn't know these stories then. We just thought it was the right thing to do. It's independent. And a profit share was the way forward, you know. Little did we know.
Yeah. And eventually, as you mentioned, when you were first starting, there wasn't really much indie about. Eventually, it kicked in, but before all the indie stuff was released from 1989 onwards, what were your musical influences? I imagine the Beatles are probably a big one for you.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest influence on the farm were the Clash and the Jam and the Specials.
Yeah. Very good.
Clash, the Jam and the Specials, but in terms of what we were experimenting with, it was Big Auto Dynamite.
Yeah.
You know, they're the missing link. They're never hardly mentioned by anybody, but they were the missing link because Mick Jones had experimented with hip hop beats and all that. You know, in the Clash, you know, you hear Magnificent Seven and you hear Rock the Cosbar and tracks like that. You know, and they were experimenting with dancey style music. You know, which was totally... A lot of the punks would have rejected. Oh, they sound like a disco, but you know, but the Clash had been to New York, so they'd been influenced by that, the ghetto sounds of New York, and Big Auto Dynamite were an extension of that. You know, it's what the Clash might have become. You know, if they'd have had a split or they hadn't sacked Mick Jones. You know,
yeah.
So when I saw Big Auto Dynamite in Liverpool in the mid-80s, I just thought that's the future of music. That is the future. Samples, drum loops, and crashing guitars. And within a few years, it was. And then you had indie groups getting remixed by the likes of Andy Weatherall and Terry Farley and people like that. And, you know, they just took group sound to another level, you know. And, like, I always remember hearing Andy Weatherall's mix of My Bloody Valentine in Ibiza, and the track is called Soon, and it's Andy Weatherall's remix of My Bloody Valentine. It's absolute perfection, and it's not a song as such. It's a groove. But when we went to Ibiza in 1990, that's all you ever heard was that song. It was the coolest song ever. And then there was another song by Saint Etienne, Neil Young cover, Only Love Can Break Your Heart, which was also very, very cool, And we'd already started experimenting with that type of sound as well. And it was really down to the samples, the sampler, and
taking it from
the improvements in technology. So samplers in the 86, when Big Audio were using them, were very expensive. They were out of our league. But by 89, we could start to afford them.
Yeah.
And that's when we started experimenting. And that's why you had that revolution in music.
Yeah.
That's why the Mondays started using them, because studio equipment, you could use it in the studio in the mid 80s, but you couldn't play live because you couldn't emulate that sound live. So, and a lot of the groups wanting to have that sound live. It was only when the samplers, the price of them started to drop a bit, that you were able to do it,
That movement you've just mentioned there, from all of this sampling and everything. In 1990, you obviously started to break the charts with singles such as All Together Now and Groovy Train, which was part of a big movement, which is obviously known as the indie scene, along with other bands, Stone Roses, The Charlatans, Happy Monday.
Yeah.
How does it feel for you to be part of such an iconic movement in music?
Well, we didn't see it. We tried to stay away from that, but we got lumped in anyway because we're from Liverpool. We didn't want to be part of a Manchester scene. We looked to London.
Yeah.
I mean, we did. We looked to London, and we looked to Big Audio Dynamite and groups like that. And that's who we looked to. I think what journalists didn't really understand a lot was going on. So they just lump things together. But we thought, if you lumped as part of a scene, it's only got a short lifespan, 2 years at the most, because then people say, oh, that's a scene, and that scene's gone now, So we were very careful not to be lumped in with that. But we were playing and cooperating with Manchester Band. We played at the Ellen Road gig with the Happy Mondays. And that was fantastic. And that was but that not only had the likes of us and the Mondays on, it had groups like the Lars on.
Yeah.
And the High.
Yeah.
And groups like that, so it wasn't just people using technology. It was groups who were using traditional instruments and that. But I think Daniel Miller always said from Mute Records, and he started off with an experimental sound called Warm Leatherette, and his group was called The Normal, and I loved that song. Look it up on YouTube, absolutely brilliant. And he started Mute from the proceeds of that. TVOD, Warm Leatherette, it was a double A side, and the group called The Normal. And he loved that electronic period, with the Chemical Brothers experimenting.
Yeah.
All sorts of groups experimenting. Even guitar groups were having remixes. U2 were getting Oakenfold to remix their stuff. Everyone wanted part of that. It wasn't really until grunge come along that the music press were able to cause the backlash, against it. And then it went back to year zero. All the technology was regarded as old hat. But I thought it was going in a great direction. There was groups like Future Sound of London did a song called Papua New Guinea, which is, you listen to it now and it still blows your mind. And there was all sorts of groups like that experimenting. So you go to bars and clubs and you hear this fantastic music, not just 3 guitar chords.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think for whatever reason, because the music journalists didn't understand that, because they weren't part of it, they hadn't predicted it, and they hadn't, championed it really. They just had to cover it because it was popular.
Yeah.
I think they were happy that grunge came along, and I love Nirvana. I didn't think, I loved it, because the songs are fantastic.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's about the songs, whichever way you treat them, whether you're treating them with drum loops. But I loved groups like the Beastie Boys and all sorts of different. I loved the Blue Nile, one of the greatest groups ever. only had 3 albums out or something. It's taken about 10 years doing an album. But if you listen to the stuff, it's perfection, you know. So there was all sorts of influences on the group, but you know, in the end of the day, I think when we were doing everything in the first 2 years that we wanted to do ourselves, and then we signed a deal, which was the template for Creation Records, but we signed a deal with Sony just because we had a lot of people employed by then. We had about 20 people employed because we'd had 18 months of unbridled success. Every front cover, every magazine, we were doing well in America. So we thought, how can we prolong this? And we thought the people who were from our original record company, they weren't that interested in success. They were just happy to sit in the office, and they weren't that bothered, you know, and go on holidays. So what we decided to do is sign to Sony just to give the chance of the juggernaut, to keep the juggernaut on the road, really. And it was probably the worst thing we'd done, you know, looking back on it. It probably was a great deal for Creation, but it was the first deal Creation did was with us, and it was a licensing deal. And Alan McGee saw that and went, "I'll have a bit of that." And he's bought us a few drinks, you know, and he always buys us the drinks and say, "That's for Oasis," you know. Not that we, you know, not that our sound was anything like Oasis, but we created the groundwork for the deal that he ended up doing, which was able to get Oasis as a worldwide band, you know.
I guess that's a free pint for you every now and again as well.
Now and again, yeah. But he also, you got to look at it that we were purely independent. So when we were doing great in the UK on our own label, but we're having to license it to indies all over the world, and half of them never accounted to us, you know, or we didn't know what happened to them. And I remember going to one in Spain, and they were all laughing, going, "Oh, this is the factory where all the vinyl is, and this is the such and such. Do you want to go and see where the bootleggers are? You know, it's part of the same factory, you know." It's like, madness, you know.
Because
so we were all a bit, I wouldn't say naive, but we didn't want to appear to be interested in business, if you know what I mean. Because we were enjoying ourselves so much. Yeah. And business, forget about that, you know. And really,
music,
you know, if we'd have signed to every major wanted to sign us in 1990, but we kept on shaking our heads, going no. And it was not a power thing, but like a 2 fingers thing, you know.
Yeah.
You wouldn't sign us. You wouldn't sign us last year, the year before. Fuck off, you know. We'll do it ourselves.
That's the right attitude to have when someone doesn't want you. Then all of a sudden they come running back.
Yeah. It's like a footballer who's being let go from a top team, and then they have to buy him back for, you know, a lot of money. You know?
Yeah. That actually happened with my team, Middlesbrough. Bamford, who's now at Leeds, I think, because he had one great season where he scored loads of goals, and then he wasn't getting his game when he moved to the Premier League. Then all of a sudden he comes running back to us. Wanted to get another chance to build him again. But I totally agree, and I would have done the same thing. With a lot of these bands that we've just mentioned, the Mondays, the Stone Roses, with you being Liverpool and them being Manchester, did you ever feel any rivalry between you? Or did
no. Music always unites. Music always unites, and football divides. But football can unite. Football can unite as well, as we've seen with Christian Eriksen recently. It can unite. Football can, but you know, I think I always remember the Mondays come on stage in Manchester, and it was the height of the Farm's success, you know, and they asked if they could come backstage and all that, and we said yeah. And anyway, when we were doing All Together Now, they got on stage, and we didn't know they were going to do this, and they started singing along, and it was their way of saying, you know, we're all in, you know, the 2 cities are united sometimes, you know. And that, as we left the stage, Sean Ryder grabbed hold of the microphone, and it was funny, really funny. He just went, "Scouse bastards," you know. But everyone was laughing their heads off. We were laughing. It was just the perfect thing to say, you know.
Yeah, and music can unite. We see it all the time. Just like when great bands come together from wherever they're from, music can unite. Obviously, in 1991, you released a debut album, Spartacus, which I want to point out is actually 30 years this year. How much does that album mean to you? And I just want to point out...
You weren't even born, were you?
I'll tell you what, though, this is what I do want to point out. This was one of my dad's favourite albums. He had it on non-stop when it came out in 1991.
Yeah. Obviously it was great because we did it all ourselves.
Yeah.
We did it all ourselves, and there's not many groups can say that. In fact, hardly any groups. We were totally independent. Even if you look at Factory and Mute and Creation and all, they all had money behind them in terms of they might have been distributed by a major company. We were distributed by Pinnacle Records, which was literally the independent distributor. They couldn't keep up with demand. They said they'd never seen anything like it, and it was hard for them to keep up with demand. But we knew when Altogether Now had done so well that we knew that the album was possibly going to get to #1, so every shop in the country had a display in the window. We had soap packets and it was like a roller coaster. You couldn't stop it. It was unstoppable, and it obviously upset a lot of journalists, music journalists, who'd written us off or thought we were, but really we didn't see it as revenge. We just saw it as
success.
Shrug of the shoulders, really.
Yeah.
When we got to #1, we were playing in Brighton, and I don't think we even celebrated. We become blasé. It's like when a team wins loads of games and we just become black, and we didn't even. I don't think we celebrated till the night after, when we had a night off. Because we had a gig. So I think there might have been a bottle of champagne in the dressing room, but it wasn't. We weren't gloating about it, But a couple of years previous, we were told by other Liverpool bands that they couldn't play with us anymore because, they'd signed to a record company, a major, and they didn't want to associate with didn't want them associating with the Farm and that, because they had other things, And those groups, if you look now, they never had any success, but because they treated what the record company said as gospel, and they didn't have a fucking clue, the record companies. They didn't know what was happening. They did not know what was happening. They were trying to buy house tracks up all over the place because they didn't know what was happening in the house music circuit, and like they didn't know what was happening in nightclubs. They weren't aware of it. It was a revolution that took them totally by surprise, And groups like the Farm and the Mondays and other groups like that were like part of that on the periphery, but definitely part of it because when we met Terry Farley, the DJ, he was saying, "Hey, use these drum loops." So we were getting drum loops off people like Third Base, who were like a hip hop band from New York, and they were really cool loops that were massive in New York and London clubs, And so we put the crashing guitars over them and the lyrics, and it was, "Hey presto," it sounds, and it still sounds great to this day. I think, if you play Groovy Train and Groovy Train became, believe it or not, a gay anthem. It was massive in the in Soho. I don't know why, but it was. But that's just an aside.
But what a song that is, and how does it feel for you when you hear All Together Now being played all the time too? Because I bought a footy compilation the other week in time for the Euros, and that was on it. Now that's what I call back of the net.
Yeah. Well, it just gets you, especially when football tournaments come around, But it's also, it was also used for the COVID response in South America last summer.
Yeah.
So all their PPE, Santander did a big campaign using All Together Now, and Lady Leisure's just done, a rap version of it, which is probably out now, but it's going to be an advert for JD Sports, So it's always getting used by different generations,
Yeah.
And I haven't, I don't know if you've seen the JD Sports. Have you seen that advert? It's only been available on preview, but obviously as the competition builds up,
Yeah.
it'll probably be everywhere. So it's
Yeah.
basically Lady Leisure doing a rap, and they just used a bit of the chorus, which isn't bad for us, I
was
mean,
going to
we're
say,
happy.
how does that feel for you? Because obviously it's a rap version, totally changing how the original song was. But
Yeah,
does it
but
make you?
it's a song of unity.
Yeah.
It's a song of unity. So I see different versions, whether it was a grime version or a rapping version, or it's multicultural Britain, isn't it? So in a way, it's a logical extension, and that it's something which I'd never have attempted myself to do or get someone in to do it, But I think it works when you hear it. I think it works, and it's an advert basically, and they paid us money, to let them use it. And then when they said what it was going to be a rap. We thought, oh yeah, sound. We don't like, when people just do straight versions of it. I don't think it works that much. A lot of DJs have remixed it, but I think this version's added something new to it. Added something contemporary, which can't be a bad thing.
Because it certainly pays you a compliment as well, because it's your song they've chose to use. So
yeah, and it's always associated with football. I mean, but you look at I've seen a few adverts in the Euros, and you see the Qatar Airways advert, and they're going all the fans together, and then they have a big thing all together now. But they haven't used our music, but basically they're using everything because our song is associated with the First World War truce, unity of people, but also of the football match. So them using that, they know exactly what they're using. It's called ambush marketing. It's just that they don't have to pay us a penny for it, And we can't sue them, because even though it's a bit naughty, but we haven't got a legal case, because the Beatles used All Together Now, didn't they? But it was never associated with football. They've used it because it's associated with football.
Yeah.
Bastards.
Should have used your music.
Well, I don't know whether that would be a big problem then, because you're dealing with Qatar. And it's one of them which we mightn't have let them use it,
Yeah, because yeah.
Speaking
of a bit of football, I can see that football behind you.
That's the Soccer AM football.
I recently seen you on Soccer AM, and I know you're a very big Liverpool fan. I want to ask, what are your expectations for them next season?
I think the last, if you'd have asked me in February, March, I would have said, regroup, consolidate and regroup, but now our last 10 games, we won 8 of them and drew 2. We should have won all 10 of them. And that was form, which was reminiscent of when we won the league in 2019-20. So I fully expected Van Dijk and Gomez get fit. I think we'll be up there or thereabouts, but it just depends what the likes of City do. If they buy Kane, another £100 million football, how can you compete with that? It's the very fact that Liverpool won the league in 2019, 2020 was more or less miraculous, competing with a state, a state-sponsored team. So that's what they are, It's I think the very fact that the only reason we're in that position is because of Klopp. If we had any other manager, if we had any other manager, we'd be just battling for top 4 all the time, I think. But because of, I think he got into Guardiola's head, and Guardiola's had to raise the game again, hasn't he? And he'd be thinking now, Klopp will be wounded by last year, by the injuries and the poor form in the mid-season, when we got beat 6 times on the run. We've only ever been beaten 3 times on the run at Anfield, I think, in our history. So it just shows you it was a bizarre season because no crowds, But I think Klopp will be hurting, and I think it'll be a clash of the Titans again. But I think Chelsea will be there as well now.
The Tuchel for a full season. I think they were
Yeah.
a very good side. And once you have Van Dijk fit as well and everything, I think.
Hopefully, hopefully he'll come back the same player. Yeah, because he was absolutely instrumental. He was magnificent.
He's just a superb defender. Finally, Peter, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure.
Lockdown restrictions hopefully easing very soon, and rightly so. Have you got any plans I know you've got a couple of dates planned for the end of the year. Have you got any plans for a tour to just get back on the road and play a few gigs with the band?
I'm just trying to see which festivals are being cancelled now because they get cancelled all the time. But
getting ridiculous now. Second year.
Well, what happened was we changed our agents in about 2018, and in 2019 we did about 10, 12 festivals, and then last year we were going to be doing about the same. And we're fully expecting to do a similar number this year. But they've all either got put back to next year. And we had a few gigs with Madness lined up in the forests. A couple of forest gigs they were doing for National Trust. So they've been put back to next year. So hopefully we'll get a couple in the autumn.
Hopefully
we'll be able to see. But we don't know. But we don't know. It depends if all you youngsters get vaccinated, doesn't it?
I'd have it any day. It's worth it just for all these things because I feel so sorry for these music venues that are just suffering. And the sooner we they're
not getting the support. They're not getting the support, But I think hopefully we get to the position where it'll be safe to go. It's all about the insurance. I think it is. It's safe to have a festival, but they can't get it insured in case something goes wrong, like another lockdown comes or something.
Because if you think about, they've got a plan in advance and everything, and I'm certainly looking forward to getting back to a few gigs, and just hopefully it can happen.
Where would you go? Where would you go, festivals wise?
Oh, I'm not really a festival type guy. I'm usually individual. Got a couple.
We were supposed to be doing Cubics, and that was in Sunderland. Is that where you're based, up in Middlesbrough, Sunderland area, or North East?
Teesside area, Middlesbrough. Yeah.
Well, that Cubics was great, but that's been put back to October now. So get your thermals out, innit?
Yeah. But hopefully for you as a band as well, because I imagine you're hoping to play a few more gigs. Hopefully these can get back soon and just get back to normal.
Yeah.
But thank you so much again, Peter, and hopefully I'll see you live sometime soon. And thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure.
As you were talking, I've just had TikTok launches the JD Sports all together now. All together. We wouldn't let them call it all together now. It's two, the number 2 together.
Yeah.
And so that's just been launched, so you'll see that everywhere.
Probably be on tonight match. But thank you again, Peter.
See you later.